Find out in a little over an hour. Nick Suss of the Tennessean joins us now from Atlanta. He was there for Titans-Falcons joint practice number 1 yesterday. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Morning, Nick.
I'm good. I'm navigating the North Atlanta suburbs like I'm 16 again, so I'm happy to be back home.
I love it. Well, it sounds like Falcons fans are happy to be at Falcons-Titans joint practice yesterday. What was most disappointing, Nick, about the way the Titans practiced out there against the Falcons?
Yeah, I wrote this yesterday. I'll say it again. When you talk about a bad practice, sometimes I think people jump to the conclusion that there was a lot of sloppiness, a lot of mistakes, a lot of failure. I don't think this was a practice that was bad because there was a lot of negativity. I think it was a practice that was bad because there wasn't much positivity. There was not anything explosive to remark upon from the offense or defense. There weren't these big plays. There weren't these big shining beacons of hope. It was just kind of a dreary practice. There were a lot of the checkdowns we've seen, a lot of the quick passes we've seen, they just weren't working quite as well. The defense was having trouble succeeding on the perimeter. It was a practice where the Falcons' talent was clear, but it was also a practice where the Titans were, let's say, struggling to show what they're good at. And when you have a day where you don't do much good, that's almost worse than a day when you make a lot of mistakes, because the mistakes can be fixed, but it's a lot harder to just find good if you're not having it. So that's the point of alarm I would point out.
Nick Suss of the Tennessean, our guest. Nick, for Cam Ward specifically, did you see a common thread in some of the, maybe not mistakes, but as you said, lack of success from him? Or how would you evaluate him specifically and what he looked like yesterday?
It was a day where, he was protected well. I think I charted 29 dropbacks, and he might have been pressured 3 times, 2 or 3 times at most. He wasn't his most accurate. There were a couple of overthrows, a couple of throws behind. There were a couple of tipped balls, which we've seen. A.J. Terrell and Jesse Bates gave him some trouble. Those are really talented guys. And other than Calvin Ridley, who he seemed to be in a nice rhythm with, it was just kind of a situation where he wasn't in time with his receivers. And it's understandable. These are practices where not only have you never faced these opponents before, you have not done any game planning or prep for these opponents before. So it is a very raw way of going into throwing the football. You just kind of have to operate on instincts and trust your knowledge. And for a guy who's never done this before, that's tough. Michael Penix is a young quarterback too, and it's not as if he was 100% on operation. There's an easier way for defenses to kind of surprise and shock offensive players in these systems. But that being said, Cam didn't have those 1 or 2 moments that made me say, oh, he's overcome this today. It was a lot of feeling out, figuring out from my vantage point.
We're joined by Nick Suss of the Tennessean. Nick, when you look at this practice, or the both joint practices that they've had, but specifically yesterday, how big of a talent gap is it between what the Falcons got going on versus what the Titans are right now?
I've been trying to evaluate that because my instinct is to say it's pretty big, but I think my instinct is just guiding me toward the fast guys. Like, I think in the trenches, the Falcons have a really, really strong offensive line, especially an interior offensive line. Mm-hmm. And that didn't seem like an overwhelming advantage, even with T'Vondre Sweat out. And the Titans' offensive line held its own against a defensive line that's got Grady Jarrett, and now they've got James Pierce, and there are some dudes over there. I think that when you're noticing the talent gap, it just has more to do with Atlanta's offensive skill players. Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts were all top 10 picks for a reason. And there is a lot of skill there. And you look at the Titans' secondary in particular, and it does seem to be a bit of a matchup problem. And as you go down the depth, look, Kirk Cousins has thrown 282 touchdowns in the NFL or something like that. And if he's your backup quarterback picking apart a second-string secondary that is primarily made of undrafted free agents, that talent gap is going to be striking. But other than Titans pass defense against Atlanta pass offense, the talent gap wasn't overwhelming so much as it was noticeable. It was, Falcons are a little bit better. And then in that one area, they were a lot better.
Gotcha. Jeffrey Simmons sounded a little exhausted yesterday with the idea of they started slow. The messaging isn't getting home. From what you saw yesterday, why isn't the messaging getting home, in your opinion? You know, he said it's the same thing that it was last year, and he's preaching the exact same thing right now. Did you see low energy? Was it just that they couldn't make plays? Or as you said earlier, what they do good couldn't be highlighted because they're not as talented as they need to be? Which one is it on this messaging of starting fast, you think?
No, that's a really good question, Ramon. That's actually what I was going to ask Brian Callahan here in about an hour when he does his press conference. It's not encouraging when you hear the de facto leader of your entire team say these are the same mistakes that buried us last year. And that really stuck out to me when Jeff pointed that out. You can put a little bit of blame on this team has been on the road for 7 days and they might be lagging a little bit. I don't put too much weight into it, but I understand that's something you can attribute it to. You can attribute it to the talent gap. But I don't know. The roster's been almost entirely turned over. It's 52% new players this year. If it's players from last year making the same mistakes, that's one thing. If it's a bunch of new players making the same mistakes, that's an entirely different issue. So I can't put my finger on the lethargy. I don't know if it's a leadership problem, if it's a coaching problem, if it's a player's problem, if it's a talent gap problem. I wish I had an answer for that, and I think a lot of Titans fans wish the Titans had an answer for that, because it's alarming to hear somebody say this is what it felt like last year when the team went 3-14 last year.
Nick Suss of the Tennessean, our guest, joining us from Atlanta this morning. Titans set to hit the practice field against the Falcons in just over an hour. I know Brandon Allen yesterday got, decleated or just cleated, maybe not decleated, and had to go out, came back in yesterday at the very end of practice. By all accounts is fine, but that gave the media a closer look at Trevor Siemian, who comes back to the Titans for a third stint and was back at the practice field yesterday. How much does Trevor Siemian, Nick, for you, help evaluate some of the bottom of roster and position battles, specifically on offense? Because Tim Boyle was a big reason why guys like Xavier Estrepo only got 11 snaps on Saturday night because they couldn't stay on the field.
I see the point.
Sure.
I don't necessarily know if I agree in that the evaluation is going to be different. I think that Trevor Siemian looked solid yesterday. When he had to come in for Brandon Allen, he looked okay. Like he looked like a quarterback who is capable of carrying an offense. And does that mean they're going to sustain drives in the third and fourth quarters of preseason games? I truly don't know. It probably limits turnovers to a degree, and it has a little bit more polish when Simeon's behind center and he understands the offense. So I think that'll all contribute. But I think, and we all know this, I'm not saying anything new, so much of the evaluation, such a high percentage of the evaluation happens on the practice field compared to the preseason games. So I'm not going to say, if you don't have a quarterback who can keep the operation going in the fourth quarter of a preseason game, that's going to hurt people's evaluation speeds. Like, I looked this up yesterday, and you guys can go read this in an article I wrote about Brandon Allen. If you look at the backup quarterbacks in Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Kansas City, three of the best contenders in the AFC, in their first preseason game, all three of those teams, their backup quarterbacks completed less than 50% of their passes. Backup quarterbacks just aren't as good as starting quarterbacks. We know this. So when we operate under this idea of the contenders have this issue, everybody has this issue. Like, nobody feels great about their third string quarterback in August.
That's a good point. We had the exact same conversation yesterday. Great minds. Nick Suss of the Tennessean joining us. Nick, when you look at this running back room and Tajay Spears, who is expected to miss time and might not be back until the beginning of the regular season, how comfortable are you with Julius Chestnut and Khalil Mullings behind Tony Pollard? And do you foresee the Titans looking for help at running back?
It's plausible. I could see it happening. I think that there is confidence in Chestnut and Mullings as players. What I come down to is the question of those guys are both power backs. Those are guys who are going to be strong behind the tackles and can contribute on special teams, and they're going to have a role. But that's not replacing what Tajay does. So if the Titans want a player who fits the Tajay mold a little bit more, I could see them trying to go out and find a short-term replacement for him. But if they don't think this is that much of a linger and they think they can get away with Tony Pollard just carrying the load for a couple of weeks to start the season, they didn't necessarily try to replace Tajay with a Tajay-esque figure last year when he got hurt. So I guess that is a long way of saying I wouldn't be shocked, but I don't think that there is a heavy necessity to do so.
Gotcha. We're joined by Nick Suss of the Tennessean, talking Titans joint practices with the Atlanta Falcons. Nick, also on this side of it, there's a new crop of young first-round quarterbacks in the NFL right now. The Titans got to see a few of them, man, either in year one or year two. And looking and evaluating what you saw from Michael Penix Jr., how do you feel about Cam's abilities that he has also for the Tennessee Titans? Because they pretty much have put Kirk Cousins, a $100 million man, on the back burner for him. Does Cam have that same type of attraction to him as a franchise leader the way Michael Penix Jr. has done for Atlanta?
I think so in a vacuum. I will admit, first off, I spent my time with the Titans offense yesterday, so I didn't watch Penix very closely. I'm going to watch Penix and the Titans defense more closely today. But from what I did see, he's a quarterback who is in command of his offense. He's in year two. The people gravitate toward him. The people respect him. The players and teammates know he is the quarterback, even though Kirk is there. And I think that trait is not that far off from what we all see from Cam when we're out there. I know you guys are at practice. You see it too.
Yep.
People gravitate towards Cam. And if that is the most important trait, and we can debate about what the actual most important trait is, but if the mental makeup and the gravitation and the leadership qualities are the thing that make the quarterback, I do think Cam has that. I don't necessarily know if that is going to be enough to differentiate him from other top quarterbacks in a league where there are Lamar Jacksons and Josh Allens and Joe Burrows and Patrick Mahomeses and Jaden Danielses and all these superstar players. I don't know if gravitational pull is enough, but Cam's never taken an NFL snap before. And the thing I keep going back to, I said this in Tampa last week, when I watch him play, I feel like he's good enough. That means he's better than the 26th or 27th best quarterback in the world. But if you're one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the world, you deserve the starting job. Yeah. And I feel like he is one of those.
Understood. Well, the other part that helps him out is the guys up front protecting him. What was the storyline of that yesterday, man? Like, we didn't really talk a lot about them. Like you said, it was the fast guys. I feel like we spoke about all of yesterday, their wins and losses. But was Cam as comfortable in the pocket that those guys hold their own against the likes of James Pierce Jr. and others out there, too? I know he's not the show of that, but that's most familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I would say one thing that goes totally under-discussed this time of year is the run game. So I do want to give a little bit of love to Tony Pollard. Had a pretty solid day yesterday. They're thudding. Maybe 8-yard gains would have been 4-yard gains in live action, all that stuff. But it seemed like there were holes out there for the run game. So credit to the O-line for that. And then, like I mentioned earlier in pass protection, I can only remember 2 or 3 times on 29 Cam Ward dropbacks where I think pressure would have affected the play. There were 2 or 3 additional plays that I should bring up where Cam spun his way out of the pocket and threw on a rollout. I don't want to speculate on whether that was pressure or whether that was designed or whether Cam did the right thing and escaped because he felt something. But in those situations, it didn't feel like those would have been sacks or pressures in live action. It just felt like that's what he would have done in live action. So I said this earlier this morning to somebody. If we think about the difference between 32nd and 16th in the NFL versus the difference between 16th and 1st in the NFL, I think the gap between last and middle is actually a lot bigger than the gap between middle and best. And so the gap is going to be much more noticeable if the Titans can just have an average offensive line. I think Skoronski's above average. I think Cushenberry, when healthy, is above average. I think Latham has the potential to be above average. Zeitler is a steadying presence. Dan Moore, a question mark, but I haven't seen enough from him to say anything less than average. If you can get 5 guys playing at least average football on the offensive line, that is such a significant improvement over the past that you kind of have no choice but to say, yeah, good offseason. Good job fixing this. And that's what I've seen so far. So call it a compliment. I have seen positivity there.
Nick Suss, far better than above average, joining us this morning from Atlanta on his way to practice. Nick, I know it's a busy morning. Thanks so much for the time, and I really appreciate it.
That was a great answer, too, Nick.
Yeah, appreciate y'all. Thanks, Ramon. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, there's Nick Suss here with us this morning on the way to practice as the Titans get ready to take on the Falcons again. I think that is your optimism, right?
That is.
In order to get the very best out of your young quarterback, maybe you overcorrect in fixing the one thing that is most important to giving your rookie quarterback a good first step in the NFL. A line that can protect him and allow him to play all 17 games.
And work with what he got with at the wide receiver and skill positions.
Because could the Titans have spent more money on a pass rusher than a left tackle and drafted a left tackle and maybe been a better overall team right away? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
We could maybe live that life. Would it have gotten the best out of Cam Ward right away? No. And that's what matters right now.
Feels like hearing Nick say that and you break it down even further, feels like it's step 1 of 100. Basically at this point, Will.
It's Michael Scott at the shareholders meeting. We have 40 days, 40 plan or 40 steps, 40-day, 40 plan, and we're saved.
Yeah.
And you can take that to the bank, baby. Yeah, no, that's where we are at this point.
That's where we are. Nick brought up a great point.
It's always a Michael Scott quote for everything.
He brought up a good point, though, too, as we speak about like this step 1 of, I don't know what 12-step or 100-step process that this is going to be, but he brought up a great point, Will, that could be a discussion. I'll just present it right now. Is Cam Ward's gravitational pull enough in the world of Josh, Lamar, and Joe to actually make him be good, too?
It's a great question.
Or how much more, like I said, on this step plan, this 100-step plan has to be added to make him that much better?
The challenge is we may not get the answer to that question for 2 years.
Exactly.
You want to see flashes of that, but Will Levis also showed us flashes of that as a rookie.
No, I think the better comparison is Josh Allen showed Buffalo Bills flashes while completing 50% of his passes, right?
I think that's fair. I do think Cam Ward is a more accurate passer than Josh Allen was when he entered.
But there was a lot of bad.
But fair point.
Before it got
fair
good.
Point.
Yeah.
I know the comparison Teron Davenport of ESPN's made on Twitter is Jordan Love.
Okay. Yeah.
Beauty of Jordan Love is he had years to sit.
There it is. Okay.
Cam Ward doesn't have that luxury.
Nope.